On today's show, my guest is Kacey Cook, and we are going to be talking about a disease that not many people know about and is also easily misdiagnosed. So if you want to hear more, stay tuned on this exciting episode of the Scott Stedman podcast. Hello and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. My name is Scott. It is March 10th. It is a beautiful day in Ohio. Usually it's odd that it's beautiful in March, but today we actually have a guest continuing with our series of me interviewing women who have a story to tell. I'm interviewing Kacey Cook right now, and she is going to share about the disease lupus. So, Kacey, glad that you're on the show.
Thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. So, what is lupus exactly?
Lupus is an autoimmune disease. It's chronic. It affects the blood. And basically, to kind of explain it in the simplest way I can, is if the average person, if you were to get a cold, your blood cells attack the bad virus immediately, the bad bacteria, everything. With lupus, instead of that happening, our bodies do, basically, it attacks itself. So it turns on itself. We have what's called an anti-autoimmune disease. So obviously anti means against, auto means self, so against self disease. And anything from having hair loss, a headache, skin issues, swelling, aching, extreme fatigue are some of the symptoms that come with lupus, that are basically some of the markers that come with it when you're first diagnosed.
Okay. All right. And would you like to share a little bit about how you got involved with kind of getting the word out about lupus and even talk about your own diagnosis a little bit?
Absolutely. I grew up being a dancer and gymnast all through high school, middle school, for about 17 years, did dancing and theater. And in about 2008, after I had graduated college, I started having some pretty extreme fatigue. Even when I was a senior in college, I had some pretty extreme fatigue and pains in my joints and was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain and chronic fatigue disorder. The symptoms got worse. And in 2007, I started having very large lymph nodes in my neck and under my armpits and in various places of my body, and started having some symptoms that went along with lupus, but I didn't know what it was. And my doctor said he was 99.9% sure I had Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 3, roughly, because it was in various parts of my body. So they ordered me to do a biopsy. And the biopsy came back, and the doctor said that it looked like a lymph node of a lupus patient. And I was like, what is lupus? And he really didn't explain much. He sent me to a rheumatologist. So I went to the rheumatologist, and she did a ton of blood tests to check my levels, my white blood cell count, and various other things that go with lupus testing. And she came back and she goes, yes, you have lupus. And I again said, what is lupus? And she just said, it's an autoimmune disease. That doesn't really tell me much. So I did a lot of internet searching and found a website called www.lupus.org, which is the National Lupus Foundation, the Lupus Foundation of America. And I got a lot of information from that website. And then last year, I did the Ohio walk here in Cincinnati, called the Walk to End Lupus Now, and got to meet the CEO, who's an amazing Christian woman, and just got to talk to her and other lupus patients. And she heard my testimony of what I had gone through after being diagnosed to where I am now. And contacted me in December of last year and asked me to become a support group leader for the Ohio chapter, which is a huge blessing. So that's kind of how I got involved with them, and kind of spreading the word about lupus was through the foundation. But for myself, it was being diagnosed in 2008, not knowing anything, being put on steroids and really harsh medicines that, as a woman, I'll admit, I gained 60 pounds off of and felt horrible about myself. And my self-esteem went down. And about a year after being diagnosed, I said enough was enough. This is not how I want to live, and this is not how I want to be defined as a person. Came off of all of my medication with approval from my doctor, started exercising, eating healthy, lost the 60 pounds, began running and becoming active again. And that has been my testimony of, and my motto is, lupus does not define me. I'm defining it.
Good, good. You mentioned when you were first diagnosed, how they diagnosed you with fibromyalgia, and then the doctor diagnosed you with some type of other disease. Since, again, like, I didn't really know what lupus was, kind of like how you said, like, what's lupus? Is it very common for doctors to misdiagnose lupus?
Actually, it's very common for lupus to be misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. Studies are showing now that there's 1.5 million Americans that are diagnosed with lupus, but there's many more who go undiagnosed who actually truly do have it. And if you ever watch the show House, he jokingly says, "Oh, it's lupus," because, it's a disease that isn't really explained to people, and they just act sick. But a lot of people go undiagnosed. So yeah, it's very common for it to be either misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed.
Okay, good. I know you talked a little bit about, your diagnosis and your journey. How did you feel emotionally? How did it take a toll on your emotions? You talked a little bit about being depressed and also with the weight gain with all the medication. Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit more further?
I am very open about my struggle because it's a testimony for me. The first year of being diagnosed was very harsh. Lupus is a chronic disease, so you have it your whole life, and you can have flare-ups, and you can go into remission, but it comes back. And for me, it was, I have to adjust my whole lifestyle again. Is there a man that's going to want to marry somebody who has flare-ups where you lose your hair and you get sores in your nose or sores on your scalp, or you swell up and it's not predictable when you're going to have a flare-up? What kind of man's going to want to marry somebody who is unpredictably sick? And so my self-esteem was very, very shot when I started taking the medication and gaining weight. I became very depressed. I, stayed home a lot. I was not as active as I was. And, for me in college, I was a very active person, outgoing. And so this really hit home for me of, I would stay home. I didn't really have the energy because the medicine I was on didn't give me the energy to want to go out and do things. And I didn't feel like I was worth anything at the time. It was a huge struggle of, I'm gaining this weight. I tried to get involved in things to focus on ministries, but I'd come home and I'd go, man, I look fat. I look horrible. I feel awful. And it was mostly like, who's going to want to spend the rest of their life with this? And so I felt very isolated and very lonely. And the hardest part was, you can't explain to people how lupus feels until they have like a minor pain that's kind of relatable. And so people really just didn't get it. They didn't understand what was going on. And the question I got a lot, which there's shirts out there, there's bumper stickers, is, well, you don't look sick. I don't look sick, but I am sick. So yeah, it was a shot to my ego and who I was and my self-confidence, because I was a confident person before I was diagnosed. And that first year was really, really rough.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you talk a little bit about it, and then you had this defining moment where you said, I believe you said, I can't remember what you said. Something about lupus not defining who you are. What was the turning point when you finally said, enough is enough?
When I looked at the scale and it said 193 pounds, and it was kind of like, what am I doing with my life? Like, this is not who I am. And I just, I got so caught up in not feeling good. And I remember there was a time when I had to cancel another event with somebody because I had a flare up and I felt miserable. And I sat at home and I just cried and cried. And by myself alone in my house, and I just openly wept. And I was like, God, this is not who I want to be. I don't want to be a person who constantly has to cancel plans on people and feel miserable about it. Like, that's not who I wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've talked about, God and ministries and talks a lot about your faith. How has your faith played a part in your diagnosis with lupus, and how has that helped you overcome it?
It's helped in two different ways. One is through the support systems I've had at my previous church and my current church. When I was first diagnosed, I had the church I had been at, I had grown up in and was involved in kids ministry and choir and praise team. And so when I was diagnosed, they really wrapped their arms around me with love and were very supportive and encouraging, especially the times where I was depressed and really struggling with my self-esteem. They were there to pick me back up and carry me. And in my current church, the people who do know that I have lupus, because I try not to broadcast it to everybody, but the people who do know that I have it are very supportive and very encouraging and pray over me even when I don't even know I am. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the CEO of the Ohio chapter of the Lupus Foundation of America is Christian kind of was a sign to me of God of, this is where one of your ministries is supposed to be, because I'm handing you somebody who is a very strong Christian, and she's going to help you with your journey. And she really has. The second part of that is through prayer and through Philippians 4:13 of, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I ran my first 5K last summer, and it literally, if it wasn't for prayer and worship and knowing that I can rely on God's strength to get me through the day, I don't think I'd be able to make it. I think I'd be wrapped up in that cycle of depressed and letting this diagnosis define who I am. And when I'm doing the support group that I lead, one of the young ladies, I said, you can't let this define who you are. You've got to overcome these things and not stay at home. And that scripture has really, to me, defined who I am as a lupus patient. Is Christ strengthens me. Only he does. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to make it through my job as a social worker, where I'm working with kids who have severe mental health issues, and I'm working 10-hour days. And so that's my testimony. That's where God plays a part in my heart, is, through worship and prayer and just remembering, okay, in the morning, I got to remember God's going to get me through this day, not me. God's going to get me through today. And if I have a flare up, I'm going to make it through that flare up. I'm going to get home. I'm going to relax. And that's the biggest part of how God has really, he's been the center of my strength and relying on him.
Good. I know, it seems like with lupus, how it is so uncommon that a lot of people don't really know what it is. And, you can look at somebody who has lupus and they don't look sick, like you said. And I know you've mentioned lupus.org. Are there any other resources that are good resources for people to look at to understand lupus a little bit better, or people who are diagnosed with lupus, how they can kind of get through the disease?
There is a book for women called Women with Lupus. That was a book that really helped me and my family and my husband understand what lupus was. There is also the Lupus Alliance. They have a lot of information, but the number one website that people can go to that literally just has fact by fact of what it is lupus.org. It is the number one website actually Googled for lupus in the nation and in the world. And actually the state of Ohio, that chapter is in the top 5 of the most searched chapters for lupus.
Okay, good. Before the show, we were talking about certain books and stuff, and you mentioned The Approval Addiction. Can you talk a little bit more about this book and why you think it's a good book for people to read?
Well, one of my therapists that I know actually recommended it to me to read because with lupus, you can't predict when you're going to have a flare up, and the hardest thing to do is constantly have to cancel on people. And sometimes you cancel on people, the same person 2 or 3 times, and it gets to the point where it's heartbreaking to you because you don't want to cancel, but your body's telling you like you can't do it. And for me personally, it became the need to want to please people. So I'd push myself and push myself and push myself to go to events, but then I get sicker and sicker. Mm-hmm. And so they recommended this book because it's all about overcoming your need to please everyone else and how unhealthy it is to think that you need to please everyone else. The only person you need to please is God, and he's already pleased with us. And it to me, it just spoke to, focusing on myself and keeping me healthy and spiritually healthy and not worrying about everybody else. Because with lupus, if you worry about everybody else, it's just going to stress you out and you're going to get sick. Mm-hmm. So that's why I recommend this book.
Good. Yeah, it sounds like, you got a lot of good resources, and just even hearing your story, it just shows just how strong you are as a person, just being able to, say, enough is enough and be able to turn your life around. Obviously, Kacey mentioned earlier that we knew each other in college, and we'd always play some mean Tiger Woods golf back in the day. Yep. And then, you did mention something about, when you were depressed and when you did have the weight gain and you were having these flare-ups with lupus, how you thought, well, no man ever wants to marry me. However, I do notice that you are married. So tell me a little bit about your husband and how you met him and talk a little bit about that.
He is definitely a godsend. We actually met online and we got married October 19th of 2012, which happened to be my parents' wedding anniversary and my grandparents' wedding anniversary. And all 3 of us were married on Friday, October 19th. And my dad actually officiated the wedding, which is the first act that he did as an ordained pastor. And on our first date, we kind of disclosed all of our baggage, all the things that we had that we were struggling with and had going on in our lives. And I told him about lupus. And he actually went out and researched it on his own. I didn't have to ask him. I didn't have to provide the material. He went out and did that. And even to this day, when I have flare-ups, he'll look it up and see what he can do to help me, whether it be soaking in an Epsom salt bubble bath, which actually is really good for the joints and the muscles, to finding out what foods I can and can't eat, things that will help me with flare-ups. He really does those things. He said to me one night when I was having a bad flare-up, I had gone to bed and he just prayed over me in the middle of the night. And he's just very supportive. He reminds me constantly, Kacey, you don't have to please everybody. You don't have to go to every event. It's okay. So he's just kind of in my stronghold of reminding me, I am worth it when I'm having those down days, and just being a strong man of God himself regarding the whole disease. And even my stepson, who's 8, he's absolutely amazing. He knows when I'm having a flare up. When he's here at the house, he knows I'm on the couch and I don't feel good. He'll go and get me something that he knows I like, or draw me a picture, do something sweet for me just to cheer me up. So it's been amazing.
Good, 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 good. As we are coming to a close on this podcast, is there anything else you'd like to say about lupus that you haven't said already?
If there's anybody out there that's struggling with lupus that you don't feel connected, you feel alone, or you have family members that don't understand lupus, go on to lupus.org and search for your local chapter and find a support group. There are a lot of support groups in the area, especially in Ohio, and they're very informative and they're very good. The people who lead them either have lupus or know somebody who has lupus or are nurses who understand lupus. And you can find a family there and you can really connect to people. If you know somebody with lupus, I highly, highly encourage you to research it and to understand it and to ask questions. Don't hesitate. There's a really good story that a lupus patient put out. It's called The Spoon Theory. And you can research it. It'll pop up on Google or Bing or whatever website you use as a search engine. And she lays out how lupus and energy really affect what we do every day. I am very blessed to have a mild case of lupus. I am able to be very, very active. But there are people who really, truly struggle with the hour to hour tasks. Their energy levels really fluctuate and they have it much more severe. What people don't know is that lupus can lead to complications in the body, such as kidney failure, that can be fatal. And they just think it's, an autoimmune disease. It can be very serious. So I highly encourage people to educate themselves on the disease, what it can do, how it can affect your loved ones and your friends or a coworker. Because if you know and you understand the disease, you'll understand, I know why you're canceling that activity with me, or I understand why you can't make it to this meeting or this party or this practice. That is the best thing that any lupus patient really wants, is for people to understand what they're going through.
Good, good, good. Well, again, Kacey, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. Again, just hearing you speak, it seems like you're very passionate. And I didn't know obviously you gave a lot of resources. Is there, I know how they have websites for people to donate to cancer and donate to certain things for research. Is there any type of thing on lupus.org that people can donate to kind of help with research to kind of find a cure for this disease?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now in the state of Ohio, every year we have the Walk to End Lupus Now event. So if you go on to lupus.org, you search for the Ohio chapter, it'll show you the Walk to End Lupus in Cleveland, in Cincinnati. I don't know if Dayton's or Columbus's are up there yet. But you can click on one of those and you can search for somebody's name. So like if you go to the Cincinnati one, you can search for my name in Walkers and you can donate to my team, or you can just donate in general to the event. And that money goes to education, towards research, towards support groups, to new patient classes, which are extremely beneficial to people who are first diagnosed because they can get connected to a support group. They can bring family. They can learn about what lupus really is. So I know firsthand the money that's donated goes directly to the people who need it. Last year's money was actually used for research for early intervention to help teens and children who are diagnosed with lupus at a young age. And right now, out of that 1.5 Americans that are diagnosed with lupus, 20% of those people diagnosed are under the age of 20 years old.
Wow. Good stats. And yeah, that's very interesting. Wow. Yeah, and again, I thank you for being on the show. I feel like I've learned so much just hearing from you about this disease that I didn't even know what it was or that it even existed. So again, thank you for coming on and sharing. again, for everyone who's listening, Kacey listed a bunch of information, and I'll have that up on the notes from the show, which you can find on my website, thescottstedman.com. Again, thank you for listening to this podcast. Hopefully next week we'll have another podcast with another woman who's going to share her story of strength and courage. So again, thank you for listening, and I hope everyone has a good day.